dark side.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm excited to be here. We have a bunch of fun people here for the chat today. Please welcome first my co-host, No Champion.
Oh, I'm still dragon. Oops.
I need to get the Light Fury one, I guess, sometime.
I have it.
The clip in MP4 form.
Oh no, I have a picture of it. Oops.
Well, we got a few people coming on. First off, our resident fated to screw the dragon bard.
You know, I'm more than just a dick on legs.
I just rewatched the Maggie Mayfish coverage on White's podcast. I was just howling with laughter because it was freaking hilarious. It was amazing.
There we go.
And also, we have our good friend Carl Saylor.
Hey, folks.
Hey. So, any time, so yokai, it's more, this is kind of like just the writers, so, unless you have something to share, I try to keep like the number of people in here small. Does that make sense? And then I've got a lobby. Yeah. So, because like if I let a bunch of people on, it'll kind of get cluttered. So, but I should be able to be giving you like a movie night role, or like say, hey, do you like if you're in the stream team, so I can say, hey, do you want to be on for this specific stream? And I'll just ask, hey, who wants to be on? And I'll give you and the other people a preferential treat, first come, first serve pick. So, and then I'll give you the streamer of the day role, and I'll let you in. That way, I can put you into the docket for that day's stream, but I can also limit it to like around 3 to 5 people, because otherwise it like gets crowded, like really, really crowded.
Also, hello, faceless figure, Moth Master.
Always a pleasure.
Hello.
Hey, Moth.
I will be standing in for him, providing voice for one of his stories.
Thank you, Becca. I'm not going to be.
Alrighty. So, anybody want have time constraints that makes it so that they need to go first?
I got my usual 5:30 Eastern cutoff.
Okay. If you want to go first, go for it.
All right, I will. I'm going to mix things up and do Mothmaster's story first.
Oh,
Okay.
How about that?
Sweet.
All right. Here we go. But what of the queen? The guard looked down at his friend in fear, his bright orange antennae drooping in concern. She's expecting. What? High Lord Ragnar's bright sky blue eyes widened. How many? If I had to judge by the size of her abdomen, General Harthald tried not to look suspicious at the queen as he noticed her disgruntled face. I'd say around 30. 30? Ragnar could barely believe what he had heard. His eyes shifted from the Queen of Halland to Harthal, then back again to the moth sitting upon her throne. She cannot! I refuse to believe that she wishes to fight like she demands. I refuse to go on her order. Ragnar clenched his fists in fury. You dare defy her at this time? Harthal growled. Let her be. If she says she can fight, we mustn't let her go on her demand. I cannot bear to see the sacrifice of 30 souls. Not against a hippogriff. The High Lord grabbed his superior's chest fur, and the two glared at each other. Are you insane? The general calmed down for a moment, seeing as how his friend had been consumed by concern and rage. I merely go on her demands, he sighed. If she wishes to fight a hippogriff during a pregnancy, then I would suggest we let her, lest we be victims of her wrath at such a worrisome time. You cannot be serious! Ragnar could barely contain himself. The queen's hand brushed against her face, and she scratched at her own fur in annoyance. Will you two idiots shut your griffin mouths for a second? She laid her arm on her throne and leaned to the side in forced relaxation. The two guards were grasping each other's fur before they turned to her. Forgive me, my queen. Harthal's eyes seemed to judge Ragnar for a moment as his scarred brow was raised. We are both concerned for your safety. It was clear on Queen Iron's far face that she didn't care. You two, go on your patrol and leave me at once. That is all I ask of you. Her gloved hand waved a little to dismiss them, but they didn't budge. Did you hear me? Her voice suddenly raised. I said leave! They looked at each other in a way that one wanted the other to leave first, but neither one had not even flinched. High Lord Ragnar's eyes were the first to meet Ironfire's gaze directly. We do not want you to face this alone, Majesty. His head hung down a little to look at her swollen abdomen. You carry many a soul within you, and we cannot risk that many sacrifices. A loud screech suddenly filled the ruined kingdom. The soldiers hugged themselves and covered their ears, and the caretakers rushed the young caterpillars within the fallen tree. A thrush flew overhead, casting a great shadow over the gray grass from the frost and winter seed. The hippogriff's talons extended, and the underside of its dark brown wings blended in so well with the snow-covered birch trees that it was hard to see from a distance. The beast screeched at once, more as it saw the armored moths in front of it. My queen! Harthal shouted to Ironfar, who let out a sudden cry and collapsed from the throne. He ran to her side, and his hands tried to meet her arms, but she put her hand in his face. Do not, she gasped. I am fine. Ironfar ran to the frost-covered barracks and grabbed a thick steel axe and a finely made sword. The hippogriff eyed the potential meal with great delight as it noticed her plump abdomen. Your Majesty, stop this at once! Ragnar took out his sword from his lion leather sheath, but the queen's eyes suddenly looked at him. He paused, and his legs felt cold. His eyes were not of a moth. No kindness nor justice was in them. Instead, they were full of hatred and vengeance. The High Lord started to back away. Ragnar, what are you doing? General Harthal snapped at his friend. Get back here! The blonde moth could not look away from his queen. I cannot. Ironfar stared down the High Lord for as long as she could. The hippogriff let out a scream, and the lady's head twisted to see a giant beak come for her. She staggered on her feet and rushed toward the bird's stomach. and felt pain shoot through her leg. She growled as she was hung upside down. Harthol rushed to Ragnar, grabbing his chest fur and shaking the moth back into reality. The High Lord groaned and slumped into Harthol's arms, and the general noticed that he was unconscious from fear. The queen felt the weight loosen on her right side as she was tossed into the air, but she raised the axe and sword high and impaled the beast's eyes with both weapons. The bird screamed in agony and flapped its wings to try and get this unknown thing off its face, and red blood began to coat the queen's black and gray fur. The beast howled and began to fly madly, spraying crimson onto the white birch trees and the frosted grounds below. A loud snap echoed, and the beast's head was tilted too far back for its neck to handle, and it crashed into the forest floor, dead. The queen shoved the weapons deeper into its eyes and made sure that its legs stopped twitching. She collapsed beside the dead bird and found out why there was no weight on her right side. Her second right leg was gone. The Queen of Holland watched as her guards rushed to her and raised her up by the arms. "Do not pity me, you fools!" she growled and spat up hemolymph. "For vengeance has been wrought upon this Rith for my husband's demise." "My queen," General Harthol nuzzled his face against her shoulder in worry. "What of your children? Surely you cannot—" "I can give birth the way I damn well want to," the queen snarled. "Now take me to the throne room and let me do it." The night was filled with pained huffs, rather different than the screaming of normal moth. But life was forged anew by the Queen of Holland, as 34 sons and daughters were taken into the carrying grounds of the fallen tree. She bled heavily due to her missing leg, but she refused any sort of anesthetic, only wishing for a cloth bandage to be wrapped around her. Ironfar staggered to her feet as she sat upon her throne. "My queen," Ragnar, now awakened from his frightened state, looked in her direction. "What now? You have your children. You fought that beast. Now what will you do?" "What now?" She eyed him. "Now the war with the Stormfeathers shall begin." "Pardon?" The guard tilted a brow. "That hippogriff was not wild." The queen glared at the dead bird that was being taken by several working moths, and she studied their blood-coated skinning knives. "Wild hippogriffs do not attack specific people like me. The Stormfeather Empire sent that beast to kill me. So now, a war must begin, as it is only fair." Ragnar stared at the ground for a moment. Then concern crossed his face. "What shall we do?" He stabbed his sword into the dark gray grass in attention. "Send a messenger to the Stormfeather Empire. Tell them that if they wish to kill me, they must destroy my pride and will. Tell them that they can come invade this kingdom, but let them know that if the frost doth not kill them, then the cold force of steel shall spill their blood instead." And that's that. Well done, Mothmaster.
Yeah,
Very well
very
done.
well done.
Ooh, I was on the edge of my seat the entire time.
I gotta tell you though, I think I have a feeling Mothmaster's work, like specifically his universe, would make a great RTS.
Yes, it would.
Oh, yeah.
Probably make a good anime too.
I actually was talking to him the other day, and I told him I want a freaking plushie of Yellowseer, the King Moth. That would sell well.
I want a plushie of the queen.
With or with removable leg.
Yes, yes, removable leg.
But seriously, all the pieces are here. He has several armies. He has hero units. He has all the pieces.
Yeah, he does.
Plenty of fodder for a campaign mode.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Moth plushies.
Yes.
Aw. Cute and adorable. They'll slay the nightmares and keep us all safe.
Yep.
Well, I mean, one of them invented swords. I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
So there's an upgrade system and a tech tree.
Oh yeah, there is. Oh, wow. And then
Yeah.
wait.
Oh,
The top tier. The top tier. I think I told you guys I made that OC Luis Featherwing, who's a freaking Mexican moth, complete with bandana and wife beater. He's the top of the tech tree. He pulls out a Glock 9.
Let's just go with that.
His
I
Pip-Mobile's a
think we
Hot
just
Wheels.
gave Mothmaster an idea.
Mhm.
Oh yeah.
Cool. Alrighty. Well, in order to give our good friend Carl some breathing room, Neph and Tark, do you want to go next, and then Carl can go again right before me?
Sounds good.
I'm down with that.
Unless we have Balerion. Unless like Balerion. Well, Balerion should be coming soon.
He's waiting on something.
He's
Yeah.
doing some errands.
Sure. Yeah, I'll go.
Yeah.
So we left off with Silica gaining her companion Peanut. So now we are off to see what's going on with Klein and his group at the moment. So North
I
Pheasants.
automatically thought we're off to see the wizard, the wonderful wizard of Oz.
Yeah. North Pheasant Step.
Never a wonderful whiz there was.
So, do we have the 30 bundles needed, Koharu? Klein asked as he sat under the tree in the dungeon's safe zone. We should. I have 10 myself, Koharu said, looking over her menu at him. How many do you have? 10, Klein said with a shrug. Ishin and Em, how many do you guys have? Denomination shared a glance. I think we both have 5, Denam replied. Then I suppose it's time to head back to Haruka, so we can turn this quest in, Klein said, as he got to his feet. That sounds like a good idea to me, Koharu agreed. When they got to Haruka village, Kirithel blinked when he saw a little girl, slightly younger than Silica, clinging to Silica's arm, chattering away at her. Hey, Silica, who's that? He asked. This is Pina. She's my new friend. Silica replied. How'd your quest go? We just turned it in, Koharu said. Ready to leave? Yep. Silica and the little girl agreed. Yeah, Silica and the little girl agreed. This is... Pina's a dragon. Silica introduced the blue net with red eyes. She can heal and fight if she needs to. Greetings, I am Pina Furor, Pina said, bowing since she was in a formal kimono of blue with pink and red flowers splashed across the fabric. I'm a healer and can use some water magic, mostly defensive spells, but I have a few offensive ones as well. Well, it's nice to meet you, Pina. Klein grinned. The more the merrier, in my opinion. Pina giggled happily as she glowed, returning to her dragon form so that she could ride on Silica's head. Leonidas Ridge. Kirithel gaped at the Panthera atrox as 2 HP bars appeared over its head. That thing was massive. The mob's massive head had a sleek, dark mane of blue, and it was twice Kirithel's height at the shoulder. Not far from the boss, there was some mewling and hissing. Possibly the last kitten they were looking for. I think we might have found the mini-boss, Nautilus said with a squeak as he began to sweat. Nautilus, go find a place to hide. We'll cover you. Yuna repeated. What are you still doing here? She demanded. The Nautilus booked it to be halfway to the outcropping and ducked behind it. Kirito glared at the mini-boss. Asuna, Yuna, cover me. I'm going to go check out that sound. Asuna nodded, raising a hand as she wove an illusion around them. Then she pulled out her rapier and charged at the enormous feline mob. Yuna followed close behind the slightly taller girl. Kirito found two cats, one black and red with green eyes. The other, obviously younger, cat had a pelt of gold and black, much like Kirara back in his actual life. Kirito didn't have much time, so he scooped up both cats. The red and black cat met his eyes and licked Kirito's arm before jumping from his arms and onto his shoulder. The Nekomata hissed at Panthera Atrox and jumped from Kirito's shoulder. The cat was covered in shadows, growing large enough to be ridden. Kirito blinked in confusion as the Nekomata spat shadows at Panthera Atrox, and the boss roared in pain. He shook his head, moving as quickly as he could to defend the fighting cat. It took the 3 players and cat much longer than the players would have liked, but finally, Panthera roared and collapsed, shattering. Hey guys, that was great, Nautilus called, coming out of his hiding place. It was, Kirito agreed. Good job, girls, that was great. So, we've got all the kittens, Yuna said. It's time to get back to Medai, right? Yep, it's time to get back to the village, Kirito said. Hey, Copal, thanks for looking after Nautilus. No problem, man, Copal said. It was my replied. It was my pleasure. Medai. Meow! Oh, Kirito turned, surprised at the Nekomata, who wasn't part of the quest they were on. Why had it followed him? Why did you follow me? Kirito wondered, reaching out to pet the Nekomata's head. A window appeared before him, and Kirito blinked again in confusion. You have gained this Nekomata's affection. Will you allow her to travel with you? Yes? No. What? Would you like to name your new companion? Yes? No. Kirito chuckled as he tapped yes to both questions. You remind me of Kirara, he said quietly as he typed the name he wanted to call this Nekomata. Thank you, adventurers, for finding Kevara's kittens and bringing them home, the NPC said when the group got back to her house. She smiled at the black and red cat on Kirito's shoulder. I'm pleased to see that the Demon Slayer has arrived. I had heard rumors. What kind of rumors? Kirito asked. The instincts his grandfather had cultivated in him were flaring. I'm not sure if they are demons or not, the NPC said, but I heard there was a pack of something making trouble for the people of Toldana. We were planning to head in that direction, Kirito replied. I'll make sure to check it out. The group gave the NPC a wave as they began walking away. Hey, Kitoke, isn't that Koharu? Asuna asked when they reached the edge of the safe zone. So it is, Kirito agreed. Hey guys, what's up? He called when they got in range. Hey Kirito, I'm glad we were able to catch up with you guys, Klein said with a grin. So, how far up the castle did you get in the beta test? Kirito shared a look with Kopel and Koharu. We made it to the 8th floor, I believe it was, Kirito said. Kopel nodded. Yeah, that's how far you got. Koharu and I made it to floor 7, I think. Koharu hummed in agreement. That's how far we got. Well, since we are all together, and there are some new faces, how about we all take a quest together? What would that quest be? Klein asked, as Koharu and Kopel's eyes began to shine. We're doing that quest, aren't we? Koharu asked excitedly. Kirito merely gave her a playful smirk. You're talking about Cow's counterattack, Kopel beamed. Yes, actually, Kirito agreed. Koharu clapped happily. Let's go! Where does this quest take place? Asuna asked dubiously. About halfway between here and Tolbana, Kirito replied. There is a ranch where the quest takes place, and we have to protect the cows from wolves while keeping them in their pen. Kirito looked to the side. That's how it went in the beta, at least. Asuna nodded. And what is the reward for this quest? A curious gleam in her eyes. Cream, Kirito said simply. Oh, heroes, I have been waiting for you, the NPC cried. The shipment of milk that was due to arrive this morning never came. I'm afraid it might have been stolen. Do you need us to retrieve this milk for you, miss? Koharu asked. Yes, that is what I need, the NPC replied. I'm sure I can find a reward worth your time. Kirito smirked when he saw his quest log update. We'll take care of it, he reassured her. Let's head out, guys. A few of Klein's friends whooped happily as they left the ranch house behind. Cobalt again! Silica hissed as she took down her third mob. Why could it have not been something else? Pina landed on her head and nuzzled her friend. So, who's your new friend, Silica? Kirito asked as the field cleared. Silica grinned as Pina jumped off her head. This is Pina Furore. She's my very good friend. The blue dragon glowed, and a young girl that looked to be a little younger than his brunette friend. You're a demon slayer! Pina said, her eyes gleaming in amazed happiness. It's so nice to meet you! She bowed eagerly. Kirito blinked. What gave me away? He asked in confusion. You're adorable, Nekomata! Pina gestured to the black and red two-tailed cat. There is usually a Nekomata assisting a clan. I see, Kirito said. Then why are you so pleased to meet me? Asuna here, he gestured to the fox Hanyo standing next to him, was terrified of me when she found out who I was. Demon Slayers are the peacekeepers here in Aincrad, Pina explained. Which clan are you from? The Yokai Taijia clan. Kirito replied hesitantly, choosing not to lie. We've been dwindling in strength for a while. I've not heard of that clan, Pina said, her cherry red eyes wide. You must have emigrated, right? Kirito blinked. I suppose? He didn't sound confident. A demon slayer hasn't been seen in Aincrad for several decades, Pina said slowly. It will be nice to have a peacekeeper among the population again. Klein walked up to them. Hey, guys. Here are your friends, Klein. Kirito asked, turning to the redhead. Yeah, I haven't introduced my friends yet, Klein said. Kirito and Silica laughed. Then do so already, please, Kirito said with a gesture of his hand. Klein nodded. This is Denam. He's my second. Hey, Denam grinned. Pleased to meet you guys. Pleased to meet you, Denam, Kirito said. He grinned. This here is Harry 1, Klein said, clapping a hand on the man's back. Hey guys, nice to meet you. And these are Ishin, Kinemits, and Dale, Klein said. Dale's our tank. I was hoping we'd pick up a tank eventually, Kirito said. Nice to meet you all. Do we have all the crates we needed? Nautilus asked. I think we needed to find 10? Usna asked, opening her menu to check her quest log. No, it was 26, Koharu corrected. I've got to. One by one, the rest of the party spoke up. Looks like we've all got to, which means we are finished. Kirito grinned. Let's go turn this quest in. Thank you so much for finding the crates so quickly. The NPC gave them all a grateful smile. We enjoy helping others, Kirito deflected. Don't we, guys? You got a round of agreement from the large group. Your reward, as I promised, she said. 3,000 core appearing in their wallets, and 3 bottles of cream each. We thank you, Asuna said with a smile. Now we must go. Kirito nodded. We are on our way to Tol Banner. Wait, Sir Demon Slayer, the NPC called. Yes? Kirito asked, turning back to her. What can I help you with? I heard the Tower Keeper has discarded his talwar, she said. Kirito felt the color draining from his face. He's discarded his talwar. Does anyone know why? The woman shook her head. No one can figure out why, she murmured. All we know is that he had a katana delivered to the tower recently. Kirito frowned, his eyes narrowing as he turned to look at the labyrinth in the distance. Thank you for telling me this. He turned back to her. How long has he been causing problems for you? He started causing problems after the last of our demon slayers disappeared. And that's the end of the chapter.
All right.
I'm sorry. When you were talking about milk and everything, what I was picturing in my mind is, yes, I must ask you to go on this quest and retrieve these magical items: milk, eggs, bread. Is this a grocery list? No, it's magical. Yeah. We need the magical shit.
Yeah.
Do my damn chores.
Unfortunately, there are quests that are chores.
It's the nature of the game.
Yeah.
I imagine it is.
The more I think about it, the more I realize that RPG heroes are very much an exploited class.
Oh, they are.
They are.
RPG heroes really need to unionize.
Unfortunately, they can't because the game wouldn't recognize.
No. I want a RPG about RPG heroes forming a union. And I want it to be an RPG about union strikers and breakers. The Pinkerton.
RPG heroes of the world, unite. You have nothing to lose but your hit points. You have experience to gain.
You have nothing to lose but your hit points.
I think one thing that, that might actually be funny if just, a group of heroes, just said, we are done being exploited by the peasant class. We want some kind of compensation.
Yeah. But in the next chapter, there is going to be, we need to clean the grounds of this shrine quest. And then we need to rebuild the shrine and the temple the shrine belongs to. So, yeah.
I pity these fucking heroes, man. Jesus Christ.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
You remind me.
Oh, yeah, Valerian's still out.
AFK.
Yeah, yeah.
If he's a little bit late, it's okay.
Yeah.
If you are late, it is okay.
Valerian is never late, nor is he early. He arrives precisely when he means to.
Yeah.
But wait. But Gandalf, when I say tea is at 6, you're not supposed to arrive at midnight. That's rude.
I thought you meant 6 in the morning. No, Gandalf, that's breakfast.
No, wait. I wonder how far that excuse stretches. How often can you use that?
I wonder. I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, my next chapter for Foxes and Demon Slayers is actually almost finished. So,
Neat.
yeah.
Okay.
All right, Derek. You up
All
next?
right. All right, you ready to crash down to reality like a fucking ICBM?
All right, let's do this.
Okay, well, just as a refresher, last time we left off, Aviana had entered the Mage College library where she met Mikhail. They had a somewhat pleasant conversation until the Archmage showed up and broke her little heart, to be blunt about that, and told her
Fuck that guy.
to reiterate the conversation. Fuck that fucking guy. Anyways, after
Yeah.
breaking her heart, her spirit, and what's left of her spirit, that's where we are today. She was left crying in the library after he left, and that leads us to where we are today. Hold on. All right. Aviana's head hung low as she exited the college gates, the guardian escorting her following behind. As she walked back onto the cobblestone streets of the noble district, she turned her head just in time to see the iron gates of the college closed. She sniffled, gently rubbed her puffy eyes, and continued walking away from the college gates. When she lifted her head, she saw Mikhail standing off to the side of the street, a look of pity painted on his face. She turned away from him and slowly walked down the street leading back to the trade district. She heard Merrick calling for her, but she couldn't find the will to answer him. She didn't feel anything as she walked, the moving of her feet, the chilly wind attacking her face, Merrick's vain attempt to get her attention by tugging her cloak. The only thing she could feel was the Archmage's words stabbing at her soul. The next time she felt something was when she was back at the storehouse. She felt the rotting steps to the loft wobble slightly as she walked up them. She recalled Merrick had said something to her, but she hadn't noticed he was gone until she took a seat next to the burlap sack she called a bed. The midday light was beaming through the holes in the walls, as well as the hole in the roof above her. Ordinarily, she'd be thankful for the light, yet all it did was expose how dilapidated this storehouse truly was. Broken boxes and insects on the ground floor, as well as the occasional scurrying rat. The loft's rotting and hole-filled wooden floor that she had been sleeping on for a while now, and shattered glass from destroyed wine bottles laying all over the floor. At the moment, the sun itself was mocking her plight. She probably couldn't even work at the bazaar anymore. Her status as a vet ensured that no one would take her as an apprentice. And her last hope for something better died before it even started. She was truly out of options. She brought her knees to her chest and began to cry again, her tears staining her brown pants, and only stopped when she heard the storehouse door open and Merrick's voice yell, "Aviana? She sniffled and rubbed her eyes. "I'm up here, Merrick." Merrick ascended the rotting steps slowly, each one creaking with every step. I brought you some food," Merrick said softly as he placed a warm and sweet-smelling loaf of bread on her lap. "The mage from the college, Mikhail, after you left, he came down and told me what happened. He gave me Dharma to ensure that you could at least have something to eat tonight." Aviana took the loaf and pulled her food sack out of her burlap bed and placed the bread inside. She tied the sack closed and returned to her previous position, hugging her knees against her chest. Merrick to her. Neither of them said a word, and the only sound came from the occasional creaking of the wooden loft. I don't know what I'm gonna do," Aviana said, breaking the silence. "Aviana, you need to forego your pride. I know you don't want to hear it, but I really think you should consider asking a noble for employment," Merrick said softly. Aviana's lips turned into a scowl as she turned to Merrick, tears still raining down her cheeks. "So I should just give in, do what everyone's been telling me my entire life, and live a life someone else chose for me?" Aviana cried out. "What choice do you have? You have no name, no title, no family, Nothing! Matron Alyssa is gone, and so is everyone else. There is no one left to help you! Merrick screamed, his voice raising and lowering unintentionally. Aviana stared at him, stunned. She had been yelled at many times before, but never by Merrick. Merrick had always spoken gently to her, as though he was dealing with a child. Even when he scolded her, it had always been done in a more compassionate way. She wanted to yell back at him, but the words wouldn't come. All she could do is sit and look into his blue eyes, which were stern and red with irritation. Merrick took several deep breaths, his chest rising and falling slowly against his shirt. Without a word, he got up and walked down the rotting storehouse steps. Aviana stood up without thinking, almost as though she wasn't controlling herself, and leaned over the loft's railing, looking down at him. You're still here, Merrick. I still have you, she said, whimpering. Merrick stopped on a step and lowered his head, shaking it, his long, dirty blonde hair bouncing as he did. I won't be here forever, Merrick said somberly. Without looking at her, he walked out of the storehouse, leaving Aviana alone again in silence. Aviana spent the rest of the afternoon in vain, attempting to find any kind of odd job or work. She even risked going back to the bazaar, avoiding the section close to Seraph's stall, not wanting to start more trouble. It was all for naught. Seraph's accusation had spread around the bazaar fast. The more polite stalls told her they didn't have any work for her. The more honest ones would just tell her they would never do business with a thief. Just desperate, she even tried going to the various craftsmen, begging for an apprenticeship or an odd job, as she had tried many times before. However, all of them turned her away with the same reason: she was of no value to them, and her reputation around the bazaar. And with her reputation around the bazaar, they had even less of a reason to give her a chance. By the time she had finished receiving her final rejection from a tailor shop, the sun had begun setting, and the town was starting to shutter for the evening. The only places left that had any sort of activity were the nearby brothels and taverns, all of which were alive with the sounds of drunken revelry and carnal pleasure. Aviana wandered the streets, kicking banks of snow when she saw them, and crying out in anger. In her fury, she knocked into several other pedestrians and almost caused a horse rider to run her over. She said nothing to the annoyed citizens who were yelling and swearing at her as she passed them by. When Aviana arrived back at the storehouse, the sun was set, and the black skies were beginning to take over the purple and orange hues of sunset, as the stars and a small crescent moon hung overhead. She opened the door and walked in, causing several rats to scatter from the main floor back to whatever boxes they called their home. She stomped up the stairs, not caring if the rotting boards snapped beneath her feet. She arrived at the top of the loft just in time to see rats gnawing at the burlap sack where she hid her food. "Hey, get out of here!" she screamed. She picked up an empty glass bottle and threw it as hard as she could at the group of rats. The bottle shattered and the rats shrieked before scurrying away, causing boxes and objects to fall, making the storehouse come alive with the sounds of objects crashing and what sounded like water sloshing. "Damn vermin," she swore. She walked over to her bag and opened it, taking out the loaf of bread. Thankfully, the rats hadn't managed to nibble through the burlap, and her meal for the evening was still safe. However, the bread was neither as soft nor as warm as when she had received it. Even with the protection of the burlap bag and food sack, the cold air had caused the bread's crust to become a little hard and cool. She tore off a piece with her mouth as crust flakes fell to the floor. Though the crust was harder than earlier, the inside was still every bit as fresh. The moment the sweet-tasting dough hit her tongue, it caused her to smile slightly. Yet the smile didn't last, as it was soon replaced with anger. Looking down at the bread caused the Archmage's words to echo in her head again. His advice had been nothing new. She had been told similar by others, Merrick included. Normally, she would have just ignored his comments, but what infuriated her was the indifference in his voice, as though she wasn't worth his time. Yet, she could feel her anger already being replaced with sadness when she thought about what Merrick had screamed at her. She wrapped the remaining bread back in its sack and tucked it away, along with the rest of her food, back into the burlap bag. If she was being honest with herself, the last 2 days had been a blessing. At the moment, she was cleaner, had more food, dharma, and was warmer than she had been in a long time. Yet all these blessings had come with a price. She leaned over to her water bucket and slowly dipped her hands, closing her eyes and bracing herself for the stinging of cold water. However, the sensation never came. When she opened her eyes, she saw the water bucket toppled over, and part of the loft soaked in water. Damn vermin, she swore again. Aviana opened the burlap sack and unhooked her cloak and rolled it into a ball, placing it under her head to act as a pillow. It was then she realized just how uncomfortable the loft was to sleep on, especially compared to the bed she had the night before. It felt painful against her back, and when she turned over on her side, she could feel the warped wood jutting into her skin. It was a small mercy that her body and mind were exhausted from the day's events, and all she wanted to do was sleep. Despite her discomfort, she closed her eyes and slowly drifted into sleep. The next time Aviona opened her eyes, she found herself in the wards, but it wasn't the same as as she had saw 2 days ago. She was standing on the main street, just past the bridge leading to the trade district. All the people were all around her. People were walking, lost in their own business, not even giving a passing glance to her. The area was undamaged, and the signs of battle were no longer there. The structures, though not as luxurious as those in the noble district, weren't full of holes and appeared to be in decent condition. It also didn't appear to be winter anymore, as she could feel the warm winds of summer brushing against her cheek and causing her hair to dance. She slowly began walking down the street, taking in the area. Everything looked the way it did before the war with Melith. Shops were up and running, and there were several stalls with merchants behind them attempting to sell their goods. She had almost forgotten that before the wards were destroyed, the trade district was mainly used for trading goods with sailors and wasn't really used for city trade until after the siege. It was only then that the bazaar became the place for all trade. After several minutes, she came across Gallerose Park, one of the few natural areas in the wards. She was shocked to find that the park was lush with greenery and a wide variety of brightly colored flowers growing from the park's soil. The park also held a small variety of trees with bright green leaves that created perfect shady spots for napping under during the hot summer days. She felt a small smile form on her lips as memories of happier days filled her mind, days of her playing with the other children when time allowed. They never had much time for play, and several of the children mocked her for being a civet, but they were at least willing to play with her. Aviana closed her eyes and shook her head as though trying to knock the memories from her mind. What occurred in the past didn't matter now. Those days were gone and were never coming back. Suddenly, she felt a searing heat wash over her. When she opened her eyes, she discovered that the street was engulfed in flames, and Gallerose Park was withering and dying before her very eyes as flames engulfed the greenery. Screaming and crying could be heard throughout the wards as people ran through the street in a panic. The sky was clouded with ash and smoke from all directions, and as the entire area appeared to be under siege. She ran down the street as buildings began to catch fire, and several explosions could be heard throughout the wards. Merrick, Matron Alessa, anyone? She cried as she ran. Yet her cries were just one just another in a larger sea. She noticed that several people were trapped in their homes, some attempting to move burning supports away from their windows, and others trapped on higher floors crying out for Tyrion to save them. Several other people were begging, fleeing, and panicking citizens to save their families who were trapped inside the burning buildings, pushed aside and trampled by other fleeing people. As she fled, she was pushed to the side and fell to the cobblestone street. As she picked herself up, she saw what appeared to be shadowy figures attacking people as they ran past. Many of them were tackled people to the street and began to beat them or stab them with shadowy swords. Mangled and burnt corpses littered the area as the streets began to run red as blood poured from the bodies. Part of her just wanted to fall in the street and accept her fate, yet she picked herself up and began to run. She needed to get off the main street and hide. There was one place she could go, an alleyway wedged between a butcher shop and the blacksmith. She ran as fast as her legs would take her and quickly slipped between the two buildings. Once there, she placed her back against the wall and panted, her body trembling and her lips quivering. Thankfully, no one seemed to notice she was there. She slid against the stone wall of the butcher shop, began to cry, and curled herself into a ball on the ground. She shut her eyes tightly and placed her hands over her ears in attempting to silence the screams around her. Not again, not again, she cried as she trembled. After a while, when she opened her eyes again, she found herself curled up on the main street, looking towards Tyrion's walls. The once proud walls that protected the city stood in shambles, with large holes decorating it and dark gray and burnt rubble crumbling off at every few moments. The street, which had once been filled with people running for safety, now stood empty. The simple but homely buildings that lined the street now just husks of burnt wood, hay, and stone. The only movement came from small flakes floating down the sky gently onto the ground. The flakes were dancing and weaving in the wind, looking like snow, until some fell on her hands and arms, leaving a trail of white and gray soot, as well as a small burning sensation. She slowly picked herself up, her hands and legs covered gray from the falling ash, and began to walk down the streets towards the wall, the burning buildings guiding her. Her heart ached as she came across Gallerose Park again. The park she had seen just a few moments ago sat empty and burnt. The trees were nothing more than dark and twisted gray wood. The flowers and grass little more than ash and dust scattering into the unforgiving wind. She wanted to stop and fall to the floor again, close her eyes, and wake up in the world she was in only just a moment ago. Yet her legs continued to move, taking her deeper into the wards. As she continued, she noticed something lying on top of the road in front of her. Not wanting to see, she tried to close her eyes, yet her body wouldn't obey. They remained open, and despite her struggle, exposing her to the horrors that lay in front of her, there were bodies everywhere, littering the streets in a wide variety of horrifying poses. Many of them were burnt with blackened and melted skin off their bones. Many of them had stab wounds, slashes, or cuts decorating their body with blood draining from them. Some of the bodies were a mangled mess of twisted limbs and exposed bones, probably from having jumped out of buildings in an attempt to reach safety. Even the buildings that lined the streets offered no relief to the carnage. Several of the destroyed walls revealed horrifying sights of broken corpses caught in fallen wooden beams and bodies crushed by fallen walls. She didn't know any of them, yet seeing them in this state rattled her soul. As she walked around, there was one corpse she did recognize. It was a blonde-haired girl in a white dress laying among several others. Aviana's body stopped and forced her to kneel and inspect the girl. Her eyes were wide open and her mouth agape, as though to let out a shriek of horror that never ended. Her skin was pale, but appeared to have been soft and fair when she was alive. Her white dress was tattered and dirty, with the ash slowly transforming the dress's color gray. It was then that Aviana's attention was drawn to the necklace that the girl wore around her neck. It was a silver pendant. Aviana's hand reached down towards the pendant as she tried to stop herself, only for her body to disobey once again. Her hand gently stroked the pendant and grabbed it in a fist and pulled it up along with the girl's head. The pendant string snapped and the head fell back down with a thud onto the cold, unforgiving street. Aviana gently stroked the pendant with her fingers, her attention focused solely on it. When she lowered her hand, the body of the girl was replaced with a different one. Aviana's blood went cold as the corpse before her now was a mirror image of herself, with her body broken and mangled. The body was wearing her black cloak, white long-sleeved shirt, and pants, as well as her boots. It was then that she noticed the pendant she had just picked up had disappeared from her hand and was now around her duplicate's neck. Her head was bleeding, and her face was paler than it usually was. Her hair was burnt, along with her scalp, and most of her skin. She appeared to have suffered stab wounds to her chest and shoulders, and her boots had melted onto her feet, as well as bits of her pants. What unsettled her the most was that she had the same horrified expression on her face that the previous girl, and the emptiness of her dead violet eyes. Before Aviana could reach out to her double, shadowy human figures began to surround the body. The figures began taking her cloak, her boots, everything they could, and by the time it was all over, her body's copy was left naked and alone, with its limbs contorted and positioned without care. Suddenly, there was a sound of snapping wood, and Aviana turned her head to see a large wall falling over. She only had time to scream before she was silenced under a mountain of wood and stone. And hold on, I'm sorry about this. Aviana's body bolted from the floor. Her breathing was heavy and visible in the cold air. Her skin felt clammy as sweat dripped from her, causing her to shiver and hug herself. She turned her head to the left and right repeatedly, taking in her surroundings. She was back in the storehouse. The city streets, the body, the falling wall, it was all gone now. Leaning against the crate next to her, she could hear her heart in her ear. She kept telling herself that it had been a nightmare, but it did little to comfort her. After she took several deep breaths, her heart gradually slowed, but she couldn't stop shaking. She crawled over to take a drink out of her bucket, only to see it still turned over. The wood under it damp with frost beginning to coat the darkened wood. Qatar, she whimpered. And that's it for today.
Wow.
They
What'd you say, Carl?
nightmares really suck, don't they?
Yeah, they do. They really, really do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's definitely some symbolism going on with the pendant and the and Aviana seeing her own face.
I'm going to reveal this now. I reveal it later in the book, and this isn't a spoiler. This is more of a motivation that I just want to clarify for now. Her biggest fear in life is basically to die without anyone knowing who she is. Like, not knowing who she is, but without anyone to care that she's gone. Because she just sees herself as sort of this blot that exists. She doesn't like that. She wants people to know her, to respect her in a way, but her biggest fear is that she'll die and no one will be there to mourn her.
Understandable.
Yeah, that is understandable.
And even though she's only 12, and I know that's like kind of an adult thing to think about, the way that worked with what just happened, she's basically watched all these bodies just been thrown into a ditch with no one to mourn them, no one to respect them, and she just thinks of that as like she could have just been another one of those bodies, and that's why she works so hard trying to make something of herself.
Which must make that exchange at the beginning all the more galling, I imagine.
Exactly,
Yeah.
but let's be honest. She's 12. She probably doesn't have the words. Well, and undereducated. She doesn't have the words to explain that to someone. But But Merrick knows her personality. He knows that she wants something better in her life, but it's almost impossible for her to get it.
Yep.
What did you think, Dunn? I didn't hear anything from you.
I like the good variety. I was just waiting my turn. I like the variety of things that you get across this, where you're definitely able to give these various people the ability to like very clearly convey what they're feeling.
Mm-hmm.
I was a little bit like, so this is a dream. So did she accidentally nuke a park with her magic powers?
No. What she is re-experiencing right now, and she didn't nuke it with her magic powers, because she doesn't have any. Period. Like I said, the Archmage was right. She has nothing. She's re-experiencing the siege. Because she was there. She was literally in the wards when it happened.
Oh.
That's why she's saying not again, not again, like when she's curled up in a ball.
Oh, okay. I didn't quite get that.
Well, it's revealed. It's revealed a little bit later, like I said.
Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
I liked the symbolism with the girl turning into her.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's always a powerful moment.
Mm-hmm.
It was also reassuring to know that yes, I am right. This was a dream sequence. I didn't just tune out for a moment and suddenly wander into a massacre.
Yeah.
That's happened before.
I walked
to comment any further on the matter.
I walked away from Revenge of the Sith for 10 minutes, and then I saw Anakin killing children.
Thanks. Worst time to take a bathroom break ever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You missed some important things there.
Yeah. Alrighty.
Okay. So Valerion's not showing up yet?
No,
Unfortunately.
Alas.
and no update on Discord either.
Okay.
So
Well, I guess that's me up then. All right. So this is going back to my my new story, The Sands of Isafar, the sequel to The Gates of Dawn. Now, if you were listening about a month or so ago, I shared a moment where a war council was convened. And this moment takes place immediately after said war council, with some little things to be tacked onto the end there. So, here we go. Lord Stolos savored the sweet solitude of the corridors as he made his way back to his office. Now that the lion's share of the damage done to the Dawn Palace had been put right, the hallways were properly empty once again. It made for a welcome relief from that dreadful war council. God, what a tedious pack of fools they were. Small wonder it was that so little ever got done hereabouts. They're not accustomed to centralized leadership, Lord Stolos supposed. He had little doubt that the late Queen Cassandra had not been inclined to keep her ministers in line, even had she been able to do so. Well, no more of that. From now on, the Auroran edifice of state would march in lockstep with his own will. War might be a bitter medicine, but for whipping an indolent government back into shape, there was none better. Lord Stolos rounded the final corner and noticed two figures waiting outside the door to his office. A man and a woman, both very well dressed, and clearly trying to not look at one another while keeping an eye on the corridor where they had clearly anticipated his return. Not a moment after Lord Stolos cleared the corridor, the man started walking briskly towards him. "Percy," Lord Kalstrom said, as soon as he was close enough not to shout. False happiness dripped from his voice like gravy off a biscuit. "I do hope the War Council went well." "I don't believe I told you about the War Council, Aaron," Lord Stolos said. "Nor did I give you permission to use my given name." "Oh, it wasn't too hard to puzzle out your agenda, rest assured," Lord Kalstrom said nonchalantly. "Now, if you have a moment, I've been in touch with some of my—" He trailed off when Lord Stolos walked right by him without even slowing his pace. Instead, Lord Stolos continued on towards the woman. He took her hand and placed a delicate kiss upon her perfumed silk glove. "Always a pleasure, Miss Babcock." Miranda Babcock's face blossomed into a smile. "You're too kind, my Lord Protector." Hearing her say those words sent sparks shooting up Percy's spine. "Well now," Lord Stolos said with renewed confidence, "I suppose you have some matters you would like to discuss with me in confidence." "I do," Miranda said coyly. "I arrived some time before Miss Babcock, in fact." Lord Kalstrom tried not to sound like he was protesting. "And I'm in a bit of a rush to catch the express, so if I could have a few moments of your time before—" "We won't be long, Aaron, don't worry," Lord Stolos said as he and Miranda slipped through the door to his office. As the latch closed behind them, Percy crossed directly to the liquor cabinet. "Can I pour you a drink, perhaps, madam, to set you at ease?" "Thank you, my lord," Miranda said. "Just a brandy, if you would be so kind." Percy opened the cabinet and... Wait, which one was brandy again? Come to think of it, this was probably the first time he'd ever opened one of these liquor cabinets. He had no earthly idea which bottles held what. Percy shrugged and selected one of the smaller bottles on the lower shelf with a cloudy white liquid sloshing about inside it. That was what brandy looked like, wasn't it? He filled a crystal goblet a third of the way and carried the glass over to where Miranda was setting herself down in the chair before his desk. Here you are, madam, Percy said, handing the glass to Miranda. That should settle your nerves. Thank you. Miranda took the glass, scrutinized it for a moment, and took a slow, careful sip. Is something amiss? Percy ventured. That was brandy, wasn't it? Oh, it's nothing. Miranda took another sip. I'm merely relieved to be away from his lordship. She nodded to indicate the door. Kalstrom, Percy groaned. It may be poor form to speak ill of my fellows in the nobility, but I'm beginning to find them a rather taxing bunch upon my patience. Well, not everyone can be blessed with your congeniality, my lord. Congeniality? Percy laughed mirthlessly. I've just come from a war council. You wouldn't believe the kind of prima donnas I've had to juggle. You'd think a common struggle will be a source of unity for the state, but for whatever reason, the looming specter of crisis appears to have only inflated their egos. Wingate was off in his own little fantasies, touting some madcap scheme to win the war in days, which any fool can see has no possibility of success. Harlock spent the entire council complaining about this or that, at least when he wasn't threatening to have the Wave Girls beheaded if they gossiped to the press. And you should have seen how Blackpool squealed when I ordered the trade embargo against Illyria. At that last mention, there was a flicker of recognition from deep within Miranda's dark blue eyes. She leaned forward, setting her glass down on Percy's desk. So, she said, you do intend to close off the Illyrian connection, then? Her voice was lower, more confident, but somehow conspiratorial, as though meant for his ears only. Percy suddenly found himself acutely conscious of the woman sitting before him, and that dress she was wearing. The radiant blue silk dress, cut low at the neck to leave exposed the naked flesh between her bosom. It was the same color as her eyes, those deep pools in which a man might drown if he lost his footing, and those dark waves of hair perfectly framing her marble smooth face. Come to think of it, his own silk suit was terribly stiff at the collar, and such poor ventilation, too. Percy tried not to stammer. Well, it is really the only obvious course of action, you see. Of course, my lord. Miranda drew closer. Now then, the real question is, when do you plan to implement this embargo? Percy considered for a moment. Immediately, I suppose? Then you intend to begin prosecuting your war against Hadvar at once? Or perhaps within a few days? Well, it is going to take some time before we're ready to commence combat operations proper. Aha! A smile spread across Miranda's face like the coming of dawn. Now, I'm hardly a general, but it seems to me that an immediate cessation of trade could tip off the Hadvari menace as to your intentions. I would propose that you leave the trade open, at least for a time, and then close it off once you're ready to begin hostilities. Thus, you may lull the Hadvari into a false sense of complacency. Percy nodded along. I must admit, you make a compelling case. Perhaps it would be better to do as you suggest. I'm glad you see reason, my lord, Miranda said. It takes a very strong man to admit when he doesn't know something. A strong man, eh? Percy sat a little straighter. Right, then. The embargo shall be delayed for, what do you think, 5 months? Yes, that seems like a suitable time frame for the moment. We'll nail down a finite date once the army is more prepared. He wouldn't tell Lord Blackpool about this, of course. That money-grubbing old scarecrow would probably find some way of pushing back the invasion even further if he knew. Better to keep him and his cronies in the dark. Wonderful, Miranda said. Also, while I've got you here, there was another matter I would like to touch upon. Of course, Stolos said. It concerns the investigation, Miranda said. The Crown's investigation into the Auroran Trade Consortium. I'd be most anxious to know how close it is to reaching a conclusion. my company is very eager to resume our previous relationship with the state. Oh, that silly little witch hunt, Percy groaned. Oh, don't you worry, I'll have that business called off at once. Complete waste of state resources from the very start. You're too kind, my Lord Protector, Miranda purred. It is my Lord Protector, isn't it? If you want to be formal, I suppose, Lord Stolos said. My lord is fine. And is it Lord Protector of the Realm or of Aurora? Miranda followed up. I've been hearing both. I don't really know, Lord Stolos shrugged. I should think they're interchangeable. I've learned that it pays to be specific on these matters, Miranda said. The realm and Aurora can carry different connotations in this context, either the land or the people. Either choice would indicate a subtle shift in the priorities of the state. I see, Lord Stolos nodded. This businesswoman was turning into a veritable wellspring of insight and knowledge. I'll be sure to give the matter some careful consideration. I'm glad to hear it. Miranda smiled and emptied the rest of her glass. Well, it has been quite a pleasure, but I believe my Lord Calstrom wanted a word. Let him wait, Percy said, rising from his seat and crossing back to the liquor cabinet. I've just realized how little I truly know about Illyrian trade, and I would be most gratified if you would teach me a little about it. He selected the same bottle from before, and another crystal glass for himself. By now he was certain that this cloudy white liquid was not brandy, and frankly he couldn't care. How bad could this stuff be anyhow? There we go.
That was great. It sounded like she was part seducing him, part educating him.
Very much so. Although, to what end is she educating him? Because,
good question.
Indeed.
You made a good point, though. The devil is truly in the details. Some people will, if you mislabel them or mistitle them, they will challenge you to a duel to the death.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and these days that translates into cancel culture. Misgender someone even, and nope, sorry, you can't get a job anywhere anymore.
There was one particular thing I remember a while back when I said, I was talking to this, and one guy, I can't remember who it was, but some guy called me a cracker. And I said, now, hang on a second. I'll have you know, I am an ethnic Swede, so I'm not a cracker, I am a skirk. You are perfectly well to disparage me by my ethnicity, but you will disparage the correct one.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Kind of reminds me of the experience I had at the bank yesterday. I don't want to say what it was, but it was a shit show at the bank yesterday.
Ouch.
Not from me, it was just something I witnessed, and I'm like, what the fuck is going on here?
Although, let's be honest, a lot of cancel culture is just capitalism in action.
No, it's not.
Well, let's take the Dr. Seuss thing. The Dr. Seuss company has decided of its own volition to voluntarily cease publication of 6 particular books. The estate.
Estate.
Fair enough.
Not corporation. It's the family.
Yeah,
and the people in charge of it that have decided.
Yeah, now see what you're doing? See what this is? I'm being canceled.
No, you're not. I'm correcting you. There's a difference.
Oh, fair enough. But anyways,
if I was canceling you, I'd be telling God to take you from future streams, but I would never do that.
But yeah, the estate decided of its own volition to cease publication of 6 books that contain, subtly racist elements, in particular depictions of Asian people. And sure enough, the outrage goes out, and what happens? The people start buying those particular books in bulk, and who profits from that? The estate.
It's very clever. It's
Yeah.
very, very clever. It's it's
Oh,
definitely
plot people.
these things now become a uh
They
how do I
become
put it?
scarce, so people want them.
Yep, they become collector's items.
Also, let's face it, it's an excuse for politicians to stop talking about stuff that actually matters.
That too, yeah.
Yeah.
They haven't talked about anything that matters in, oh
A
dear
long
God,
time.
4 years.
Yeah.
Not since the
Possibly
Hitler
longer.
arc.
Possibly longer.
Well,
Yeah.
I don't know.
no, not
There
since
was
the
a thing in
Trump
episode
arc.
68 when the whole Great Society thing, but then they killed off two of those characters, Dr. King and Bobby Kennedy, and I don't know, the whole show just kind of lost its luster.
It lost its heart, man.
Yeah, poor Bobby Kennedy.
Alrighty.
Done. You're up.
Alrighty. So I actually re-added this bit in earlier this week.
Oh, hang on. Before we mention that, Mothmaster commented about the arc. This is actually something I was mentioning in the we were talking about in the pre-show a little bit. I was thinking of putting together a YouTube channel that was a review of the 20th century as a television show, where each year would be an episode, and the wars would be different arcs, and every so often the president of the United States would be recast by a new actor, things like that. just that's what we were talking about.
Yeah.
Idle speculation at the moment.
Yeah, I would watch it. So, okay. So, what I'm going to. So with this next chapter, I'm going to be referencing a lot of stuff that happened in the previous 4 books of this series. Mainly stuff that happened in the climax of Blood of the Dragon, a lot of stuff in the First Dragonstrife and the War of the Dragons. So I hope that we'll be able to kind of like get some context. It's kind of referencing a lot of history between 2 particular dragons that really like have a long history. And hopefully like people will be able to follow along like well enough and kind of be able to go back and read the other 4 books and be able to like, oh, okay, this is interesting. Okay, so that's what he's jabbering on about. Alrighty, so let's do this. Silvery scales shimmering in the sunlight, Melee soared over the landscape of Satharis, content after her long hunt and full stomach. She swung over the city, taking a moment to note Carleon and Hera underneath her in the bazaar. Satisfied that her young rider and his hatchmate were all right, Meles winged her way toward the castle. Her good mood evaporated when she saw the red and black dragon catnapping in the yard. Growling, she landed heavily on the wall and roared down at her old rival. Instead of uncoiling and roaring back, Meraxia's eyes opened lazily and she lifted her head unconcernedly. Yawning ostentatiously, she smiled up at Meles like a snake. Ah, lovely, she remarked. Our dear former amnesiac has deigned to grace me with her presence. Meles growled and spread her wings challengingly. Give me an excuse, Meraxia, she snarled. And you'll do... what? Meraxia swished her tail and ran her long tongue over her lips. You're feisty, but I'm always going to be your better. She lowered her head to rest her wing claws. Meles jumped down and hissed at the other she-dragon, trying to get a rise out of her. She had to get this one victory. One day, Meraxia, she growled, our riders will have a quarrel, and you and I will finally settle our score. Seeming bored, Meraxia yawned. Last I checked, you were rather too far beneath my notice to warrant a score. She flicked her tail absently. Also, she scratched behind her horns. My memory isn't quite the best. What was that supposed score you keep going on about? She's baiting me, Maylis thought, icy rage boiling inside her. You remember perfectly well that you killed my mother, Shaira, and watched as Vagar murdered my sire, Balin, she snarled, letting her mouth open ever so slightly, saliva dripping from her mouth to fall onto the cobblestones and freeze despite the heat. Despite how close Maylis was, Meraxi didn't seem bothered by any of her threats. She wasn't your mother. Vagar killed Aphrodite, as I recall, and when Balin attempted to get revenge during the Dragonstrife, Vagar put him in his place. Her lips quirked in a smile, and that place was in the river, impaled on a ship's mast. Rage spiked inside Meles at how casually Meraxia had mentioned her parents. However, the slight tightening around the red and black dragon's eyes at the mention of Vagar gave him an idea of how to hit back. Ah, Vagar, she made her tone honey sweet just to make it sting. Aren't you so sad you don't have to compare yourself to her anymore? Pathetic worm that you are, you could never have beaten her. Meles barely had time to blink before Meraxia's claw lashed out. A line of pain crossed her muzzle as she snarled and tried to right herself, only to have the larger she-dragon pounce on her, mouth closing on Meraxia's silver scales and bearing her to the ground while placing her paw on her shoulder, pinning her to the cobblestones. I would refrain from saying such things if I were you, Meraxia purred into Meili's ear. I am the only dragon living who matched Vagar claw to claw and held her own. You are but a flickering candle by comparison. You would do well to remember. Another roar, this one far deeper than either Meles or Meraxia, shook the ground as a large onyx shadow descended onto the courtyard and slammed feet first into Meraxia, sending her tumbling across the yard, only to quickly right herself and rise into the air. Oily black armor on black scales drinking in the light, Catastros landed heavily on the ground, golden eyes gazing balefully at Meraxia. The big male dragon growled deep in her chest. In his cavernous chest, fire flickering at the back of his throat. Touch my mate again, and I will tear your head off your neck. Catastros's voice was matter-of-fact rather than boasting or even threatening. Meles pushed herself to her wingtips and snarled at Meraxia, who hissed in return. Try it, hatchling. Meraxia snarled, though her and Catastros were fairly even in size. I was old before you were born. I fought Vagar and held my own when I was half the size I am now. Catastros prowled toward Meraxia. Do not test me. My rider will be Dragonlord after his father dies. Meraxia hissed, lashing her tail like an angry tiger. If that's the best retort you can come up with, you're not worth my time. Catastrophe turned his broad back to her, flicking his armored tail, the mace-like construction on the end scraping the stones. Meraxia glared at Catastrophe and hissed at the other dragon. That armor should be mine, she growled. I am the true offspring of Echidna. Your blood has been diluted and dirtied. It fits me better. Catastrophe bared his long ivory fangs, lips peeling back from his own red-tinted fangs. Meraxia crouches to pounce, but Catastrophe turned his eye on her and twitched his tail. Try it. His tail smacked down on the cobblestones, creating a web of spider web cracks across the stones. I dare you. Clearly chastised, Meraxia snarled at Meles. When that reckoning you badly want comes, you won't have him to protect you. She turned and hopped onto the wall to use as a landing platform. Melis grinned and flicked her tongue at Meraxia as the other dragon spread her wings and threw herself into the air. Playfully, Melis nipped at her mate's ear and cuddled up against him. Rumbling, the younger dragon rested his head on her neck affectionately. "Thank you, flame of my heart," Elise nudged him, trying to roughhouse with him, but Catastrophe had gotten so big at this point that it was pointless to try. "I'm sure you had it handled." Catastrophe let her push against him, but he was half again her size now, which was extremely unfair since she could no longer push him over and have an even wrestling match. She was older than him, but he was a fresh northern dragon who had bonded with a rider. Melis was island stock, and her kind was smaller than his. She tried to bat at him, but he just nudged her with her snout, and she was nearly knocked off balance. "It's not fair that you're bigger than me," Melis pounded, rising up and nipping at his neck. "It's the way of the world." Catastrophe settled down onto his haunches and lay down, absently scraping his wing talons against the cobblestones. "You two shouldn't antagonize each other. It's a pointless endeavor." Irritated at the very notion of leaving Meraxi alone, Melis headbutted his neck, which caused him to grunt. "She's the only one I can take vengeance on now that Vagar's dead." She lashed her tail angrily and glared after the rapidly shrinking shape. We should hope that another civil war doesn't occur." Catastrophe absently settled himself close to the ground. "This war is bad enough. I've been fighting most of my life." Melis bared her teeth. "I'm bored of fighting Satharans. I want a real challenge." "Better to have peace." Catastrophe yawned. "You're no fun anymore." Melis at least slid her head against his. "Come on, doesn't the thought of battle stir your blood?" "Not really." Catastrophe spread her wing over her. "There's nothing to challenge me anymore." Wistfully, he looked around and puffed a line of smoke from his mouth. "The world is so small now. We've made it small. We should see if we can get our riders to explore to the far west and find more lands. More challenges for us to face," she suggested. "To what end?" Catastrophe narrowed his golden eyes. "We have enough issues here." "You're missing Darien again, aren't you?" she said quietly. Catastrophe's eyes misted over at the mention of his first rider. "Yes," he acknowledged. "It meant so much to him that he made peace here and across the rest of the Empire. And then only 100 years later, I get to watch all the work that Darien and I put into this place fall apart." He lowered his head to the ground. "What's the point, Melis?" he growled. "If all that we do doesn't last or get destroyed by petty, short-sighted humans, what is the point of continuing to fight?" Melis had no answer to that. Instead, she just cuddled up to him and started humming contentedly. Eventually, he began humming in time with her, and that was good enough. Hera and Carlion chatted amiably with their guards all around them, both of them examining the merchants' and hawkers' wares as they were presented to them. The roars from the castle announced Melis and Meraxia, but the people were somewhat used to dragons, so there was only a brief halt before resuming. All of the various good sellers tried to interest the silver-haired Dragonlords in this or that, but Hera and Carlion politely rebuffed them. Though that came with a few exceptions. Anytime a sweet merchant came up to them, Hera and Carlion bought what was offered, and Carlion used some of his winnings to buy a couple new pieces of jewelry made from local stones. Hera had never understood her little brother's ring and amulet fascination. He'd assembled a large collection and was able to wear a different one every day of the week, every day of the month, with several left over. And he always had a ring on each of his middle fingers. "Well, who are you going to spend the rest of your winnings on?" Hera asked with a grin. "That Parthian noble lady Ajania? Or that pretty Harag boy, Scareclad?" "The former." Carlion waved a dismissive hand. "I need to settle down at some point, so might as well go with the one that's going to produce children." "The workings of nature are so inconvenient, dear brother," Hera remarked with mock sympathy. She doesn't care that much, honestly. Carlion shrugged. Besides, Circlon may have moved on by now. Wasn't going to work out. Good to see you're being responsible, she remarked. You? Carlion asked. At some point you're going to know your duty as the eldest, especially now that uncle's dying. If our beloved cousin dies, his mouth twisted, we're next in line. True, Harris agreed. I'll just have to find a man worthy of me. Once you get Meraxia under, you'll have to beat the suitors away with that new sword of yours. Carlion grinned. Don't say that. Hera punched his arm as hard as she could, though she was laughing. You'll jinx it happening. Perhaps. But who else will ride her? He asked with a shrug. At this point, none of the young dragons have bonded to you, which means that you're meant with one of the currently bonded dragons. It is a logical assumption, Hera admitted, but until then, that happens, I'll just do my best with steel in hand. Well, when that happens, I look forward to dancing the skies with you. He clapped his hand on her shoulder. Even if Catastros hates Meraxia. Sounds like there's no small amount of projection there, little brother, she remarked. Not totally impossible. Carlion shrugged, then blew out his cheeks. How on earth did he bond with sodding Meraxia, anyway? It makes no sense to me. Why her and not one of the hatchlings? At least his hate is a candle beside Meili's. Hera chuckled. She must have been so angry when she got bonded to father after being bonded to Lady Samael. Yeah. Arleon shrugged and then nodded toward turning. Come on, let's go spend the rest of the afternoon with at Ajania's manse. Sounds like a plan. The Parthian governess was sitting on the veranda outside her large mansion, sipping on some of the tea that she liked so much. Ajania was not exactly beautiful, but she was pretty in a short, curvy sort of way. As soon as she saw Carlion and Hera, she began grinning, which made her even more pretty. My sweet dragon, she remarked, standing up and gliding over to them with an easy, if slightly bouncing, grace. And your esteemed and courageous sister, an honor, she ursied. My house is blessed to have the hero of Slaric Ridge visit me. Hera smiled and gave Ajani a long hug. She quite liked the other woman, and out of her brother's various levels, she was the best of them. I just did what needed to be done, she shrugged as the other woman ended the hug and motioned them to follow her up to the veranda. Not how I heard it, Ajania laughed, glancing affectionately at Carlion. She's far too modest for a war hero. She tilted her head. As I heard it, you tipped the scales in a dead heat by your valiant charge into the middle of the Satharis cavalry with your horsemen. Now that was a day to remember. Carlion reminisced with a grin. It was like watching Megar or Selara herself carving her way through the enemy ranks with Silver Queen. I don't know of anyone who had been able to do that without a dragon. Ajania took Carlion's arm, stroking it absently while smiling at Hera. I imagine that once you gain a dragon worthy of your valor, you will be unstoppable, she predicted. Tilting her head, she glanced at Hera's side and saw Darkfire. You have a new sword, she observed. Why did... Abruptly she seemed to realize what exactly the sword was. Is that Darkfire? She let out her breath in a gasp. Grinning with pride, Hera drew the sword and rested on her palms. It is indeed the sword of Aemond himself, forged from the bones of a demon. For some reason, as soon as she drew the sword, she felt a core of heat build inside her. Does it really catch fire on command? Ajania asked. Hera spun the sword upright, then pushed the heat out of herself and into the sword. Immediately the sword burst into flame, but the light seemed to push away from the weapon rather than emitting from it. For a moment Hera lost herself in looking at the blaze, then released the warmth in her chest, extinguishing the blaze. Clearly mesmerized, Ajania reached out her hand as if to touch the now cold weapon, then pulled back. May I? She asked, her sense of propriety settling in. Hera allowed the other woman to take the sword, feeling a comfortable sense of gratification as Ajania oohed and awed over the ancient sword. How did you win it? Ajania asked, returning the blade to Hera with a deeper level of respect than before. She put her at a princely and as well-deserved place. Carlian smiled with pride and put his hand around Hera's shoulder. And where was that? And where is that? Ajania asked. On his pompous ass. Carlian smiled and ruffled Hera's hair. I don't think I've ever seen anything as amazing as that. Ajania giggled and took them by their arms. Well, we should go celebrate. I just barely got a set of wine from Parthia, and now might be a good time to use it, she declared, motioning to one of the stewards who rushed to grab the refreshments. They walked inside to a set of couches in the open first floor of the mansion, a wide view of the garden around them. Both Carlian and Hera placed their swords against their couches before taking their seat. Ajania and Carlian curled up next to each other while Hera followed suit, resting comfortably on her elbow. So when are you leaving for campaign? Ajania asked as the serving man brought a trio of glasses. Hera barely touched hers, mostly because she did not like being intoxicated before going on duty. Her tolerance for alcohol wasn't that good, and this stuff was very focused, potent. Like the fish he secretly was, Carlian eagerly drained his cup up as if it were water before proffering it for a refill. Hera is leaving in a couple days, he remarked, absently sliding his hand around his lover's waist and gently running his hand up and down her side. And she's going to be bringing the prince with her. Hopefully he'll learn some much-needed life lessons. Hopefully, Ajania agreed, though she herself had never met Narcissus. Nobody here other than the soldiers had met the man. Anyway, what are you planning on doing for your last few days in the city? She asked, She turned her soft brown eyes on Hera. Not really passionate about the subject, Hera shrugged. Probably get some battle plans, get some good meals in, nothing too special. Ajania looked disappointed. How boring, she remarked. It's hardly fit for you to have so little fanfare. I don't particularly like fanfare, Hera fiddled absently with Darkfire's pommel. It's never suited me. Too modest, Carlian smiled and tipped his glass toward her. You'll downplay every victory you have just to avoid a well-deserved parade. Because parades are boring, pointless, and make my head hurt. Hera grimaced. Far too much noise. Aren't battles noisy? Ajania asked, eyes flicking to Carlian. Bloody deafening, Carlian confirmed, reflexively putting his finger in his ear. At least battle noise doesn't have horrible trumpet playing right in your ears, Hera shrugged. You can also fight through the battle. You're actively trying to get through the men in front of you. In a parade, you're stuck on a bloody horse, she glanced at Carlian. At least you have your dragon flying above the noise and clamor. Carlian tilted his head, then shrugged and nodded indifference toward her. Fair point, little sister. He swirled the wine in his cup, then drank it. Ajania giggled. Isn't she older than you? She asked. Are you just making fun of her height? Yes, Carlian and Hera said in unison, which made the dark-skinned woman laugh even harder. Well, who am I to judge? She wiped a full tear from her eye before she took another sip of wine. I would often make fun of my brother for how much shorter he was than me. Sounds fair. Carlian smirked and took a sip of wine, then started choking as Ajania poked him strategically in the gut. Wrong hole, little brother, Hera asked innocently as she started pounding his chest. Ajania doubled over laughing, and Hera couldn't help a slight grin. You two are going to be a fun family, I must say, she remarked. Whatever Lady Carlian finally settles on, we'll be extremely lucky. Actually, Carlian remarked, then started another coughing fit. Finally, he managed to catch his breath well enough to speak. After taking a calming breath, he slid out one of the pieces of jewelry out of his pocket, a small necklace made from Usipo with a sapphire inset in the middle, and offered it to Ajania. I was hoping that you might be that lady. Hera's eyes were just as wide as Ajania's as the plump, dark-skinned woman took the necklace. You are serious? She turned it over in her hands, looking as stunned as Hera. I am very serious. For once, Carlian's normally playful tone was serious. I love you, Ajania, and I want to have you at my side. Hera leaned back, feeling somewhat awkward as her brother and his paramour gazed into each other's eyes. They did love each other. That much was clear. Hera knew it wasn't exactly the most advantageous of marriages, but considering the fact that Carlian was a second child as well as being something of a free spirit, it made sense. Hera was rather choosy about her lovers. She'd only had one, and that had only lasted a short time. So, shall we stay here and maintain my governorship, or shall I come with you? I was thinking we could manage my lands, Carlian said. Ulbar is likely to come under my governance once the war is finished. Satharis is probably going to go to my father or Hera. He nodded to her. Most of the other lucrative imperial provinces already have a governor. Althea, Rune, Numenor, the lands around Minan Drakkar. So since I'm the only one, and I'm owed that as part of my military service, that land will be subject to our administration. That sounds like a good task. Ajania leaned forward in her chair to look her in the eye. Well, if you are offering this, then I shall accept it. She put her hand on his cheek and pulled him in for a kiss. For a moment it was light, then it quickly became passionate. After the kiss went on for at least a couple minutes and had also progressed to groping each other, Hera cleared her throat ostentatiously. Not that I'm not enjoying the sight of my little brother and his lover eating each other's faces, she remarked, but surely you can do this while I'm not here. Sorry, got carried away. Carlian pulled his lips away, but he still held his betrothed close. Well, we have a lot to plan and a lot to tell people. May we bring Circlin with us? She asked. I do quite like him. I like him quite a bit. Maybe he'll probably like to continue being a paramour, but over at home there aren't as many public male lovers. His face became quite slightly sad. I hope he'll be fine with it. I believe he will. Ajania stroked his hand affectionately. He loves you, just like I do, and I imagine he'd like to stay with you. Well, since you two are getting down to the business of discussing your bedroom life together, I will take my leave. Hera nodded to her brother and her prospective sister-in-law, then made as if to stand up and leave. Good luck to you both. No, please stay, Carlion protested. This is probably the last time for a long time that we're going to be able to spend time together. Yes, I agree, Ajania chimed in, and, and then standing up and walking over to Hera so she could next to her. Please, I can dust up the Parchenzi board, and we can all play a game together. Hera smiled and gave the other woman a hug before walking to the door. This is a special moment for you two, and I would probably let you have it to yourself. Should probably let you have it to yourselves. I'll go find a group of soldiers to spend the evening with. You won't have to worry about me being offended. Both Carlian and Ajania seemed disappointed, but they did not try to stop her as she walked out into the sunset-drenched evening. From where he stood outside the house, Ergast stalked up to her like a prowling wolf, taking a swig of his draught. Well, that was short, he remarked. It was, Hera agreed. When you're in the room with two people who clearly want to tear each other's clothes off, the best option is to quickly leave so that they may follow their heart's desires. You humans and your seemingly uncontrollable urges. Ergast shook his head. In the homeland, unmarried orcs have organized no-holds-barred mating rituals on a biannual basis. Hera raised her eyebrows at him. Ergast snorted derisively. We at least have the decency to do that in caves or secluded forests where we don't have to worry about being seen showing affection. The grizzled veteran growled. You humans just start that strange mouth-to-mouth thing whenever you feel like it. It is fun, Hera shrugged. Still strange. Still strange. Ergast shook his head. Chuckling contentedly, Hera patted her friend on the shoulder. Well, either way, we should probably find some good old drinking den. We'll have an easy time finding some soldiers there. Agreed. Urgas sounded relieved to be going somewhere that had people of his type. It wasn't too hard to find a den, especially considering there was a dedicated pub and tavern district. What was a tad more difficult was finding a soldier's den where Hera and Urgas knew enough of the patrons to make it worthwhile. Once they walked into the bar, though, then the soldiers raised an almighty deafening cheer. Glad to see you arrived. Torash raised a large tank of wine and put his hand around Gagul, his wife. The yellow and black mottled orc female was almost as big as her husband, though her physique was obviously feminine, at least by orc standards. This amounted to a slightly less flat bust. Both of them took a large drink of wine before motioning the Parthian bartender for some drinks. Both of you should have gotten here earlier, Gagul remarked, shaking her head. What kept you? My brother decided to ask his current paramour to marry him, Eric called over the noise of the crowd. All the soldiers began pounding their fists on the tables in approval. Took the philanderer long enough, Gagul remarked, baring her fangs in a smile. Indeed, Hera grinned and took a sheet. How are your children doing? Has there been any news? 2 of our younger sons stationed in Minas Drakkar are getting married. Gagul waved the letter in the air. They're hoping that we will be able to return from the campaign for the wedding, but that is unlikely. It might be more likely than you think, Hera leaned back in her chair. We're going to get them out of their forests and onto the field. Really? Gagul asked eagerly, turning toward Torash. Did you know? Smiling, Torash pressed his head against her forehead. I wanted to surprise you, he grinned. But even if we do get done, we might not arrive in time. Well, we'll have to kill all the bastards as quick as we can, then. Gagul gave her husband a pat on the arm as she closed her eyes and pushed her forward against his. Good attitude. Hera raised her cup to her lips and drank. We'll leave at first light in 2 days. And that is the end.
Wow.
I really like the way how your dragons have their own sense of body movement, how they are able to portray things like the way you do the body movement. That's probably my favorite part.
Yes. Yes, it's definitely one of my favorite parts.
It really makes them seem like real sentient creatures. I mean, I know they can speak, but it really does play up that these are beings in their own right.
Mm.
Yeah.
Ironically, makes them more human.
Yeah, it does. It gives them a sense of what's the word? Yes. It gives them a sense of intelligence. It gives them a sense of actual intelligence.
Yeah.
Well, no, but it makes them feel like a living creature.
Yeah, that too. That's part of what I meant.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, Hera is wonderful. I love her. I can't wait to get to this book.
Yeah. Yeah, and I definitely tried to make Meraxia. She's a mean girl. She's very mean.
Yeah, she is.
Yeah.
I wonder what happened to Balerion. There hasn't been a.
Yeah, he's in the comments. He says he might be on in an hour.
Oh.
Oh dear!
By which time I'm very much going to be conked out. So
I got somewhere to be.
I think we might have to. I don't know if we'll be able to continue that long, but
no, I don't think so.
Yeah, but I guess what do you think of the dynamic between the 3 dragons and kind of the contrast between how Catastrophes and Melees interact versus how they interact with Meraxia, who's kind of the odd person out in this particular trio.
Oh, I definitely enjoy it. It's not. I would have probably preferred something closer to Harry, Hermione, and Ron, or Luke, Han, and Leia, but this is good too.
Well,
and not all trios are going to get along. So.
That is true.
Well, they're kind of just temporarily put together, kind of because they've been on the opposite side they've kind of only been on the same side for about 100 years, and Melee's has a very personal grudge, and that's never going to really be resolved.
Unfortunately.
No. And especially now that Vagar is dead, she's really bitter.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Because she wanted to fight Vagar?
Um.
Or
Well.
is it that she wanted to be the one to kill her?
Uh.
Because I can certainly see why it would be the latter. And I can see why it would be the former too.
Basically, what happened was Vagar. She actually had her mind wiped by a mysterious force, along with her rider, and left after being blown away by a storm to the far south. And
Ah.
she lost her memory, and then somebody restored her memory, and then she just found out, oh, Vagar's already dead. So that's and kind of just find out that she missed Vagar's death by only like 12 years.
Yeah, poor girl.
Yeah. It's
I mean, I understand why the other dragons don't like her, but Vagar is still my baby.
yeah. Well, part of the thing is like she's been on the opposite side of a war with these guys for a while, and um, the kind of I kind of leaned into kind of the fact that she was OP and made her the antagonist of the next three, or
Hmm.
at least the antagonist's weapon,
Yeah.
and kind of Catastros kind of is now kind of used to be kind of an eager young dragon, and now he's kind of developed into kind of more of the somber, slightly dejected badass, and kind of he's
is
really
that
sad. Oh,
is
go for it.
that Vagar's armor he's wearing?
Yes, that is Vagar's armor he's wearing.
Thought so. It looked familiar.
Yeah, and kind of the reason why Meraxia wants that armor is because um she was created by she wasn't born. She was created by by through the sacrifice of thousands of humans
Mm-hmm.
by an eldritch dragon god.
Ugh.
And might explain a little bit of why she's a bit of a mean girl,
Yeah.
um but because like this creature is actually like related to her tangentially, she wants that armor really bad, and she's really really envious because Catastros is younger than she is. Like he's only like been bonded for about 100 years, which is a lot shorter than most other dragons. Like Melee's has been bonded for like 500 600 years,
Mm-hmm.
and Meraxia has been around even a little bit longer, like 200 years or something.
Yeah, this is probably explained in the book itself, but what is the dragon's usual lifespan? Are they are
Um,
they functionally immortal unless killed, or do they have a sort of a limit?
they're pretty much functionally immortal until they die.
You mean until something kills them?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, if you're immortal until you die, then you're not immortal.
No.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
they're yeah.
So, they're functionally immortal in that old age doesn't kill them.
They have eternal life, but that doesn't mean they
Mhm.
can't be killed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like elves.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
that sounds about right.
Yeah. And we will be seeing elves later on in this book from a different point of view than they're usually portrayed. Um, Which
That sounds interesting.
I know which way. I think I know which way you're going with this, but if you think about it, elves are mostly portrayed as assholes. So
Yeah.
but they're not directly antagonists.
oh,
They're not actively trying to kill the protagonists
Oh.
usually.
well, not unless you're Elder Scrolls.
True.
Yeah.
Skyrim
Yeah.
belongs to the Nords.
Yeah.
Stormcloak for life.
Yeah. So what do you think of like Hera and Carleon's relationship? Does it seem like believable that they're like little big sister and little brother, and he just constantly makes fun of the fact that he's taller than her?
Oh no!
I
That's perfectly believable.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, like he's just kind of this like kind of free spirit, and she's snarky, but she's fairly responsible,
Mm-hmm.
and there's kind of just that dynamic between them, and she just like prefers being with her soldiers because that's pretty much like most of what she's been doing for the last 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
It's I'm excited to get more into like I actually just barely wrote a little bit more with like Meraxia and Narcissus, and kind of just like how she interacts with her rider as opposed to her rivals.
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully that'll be interesting. I think I'm going to read that next week, I believe.
Okay.
So,
Mhm.
yeah, that's kind of that's all we have for today. I think we will conclude it there. The links to our good friend Carl Saylor's book are in the description below, as is Neph's channel. Tarek, as of yet, does not have anything to pimp, the lazy slacker.
Please, you son of a bitch!
Early days yet, Tarek. Early days.
Don't worry about it.
You son of a bitch! You don't know me. You don't know what I do.
Well, you don't have anything on YouTube to pimp. So
Sorry, I couldn't resist.
Yes, because I work for a living.
I do
Yeah.
too, technically.
Technically, no, I can say I work for a living. There's no technicality there.
Killed hunting. You're checking.
The gentle laborer will no longer suffer. Rise up against the Lord Commander.
Mutiny!
Back to the people.
So basically, I'm the Jon Snow in this situation.
You're about to lose much more than your character development.
Probably yes. Anyway, well, thank you very much. I'll see you guys later. Adios.
Bye.